Thank you, Gail, and thank you, Oregon, for that very, very warm and kind introduction. Just to begin, if I have sometimes been known to go on a little too long, I think we have about an hour together, so that should be sufficient even for me. But if by any chance you do happen to get a little bored or a little frustrated with the direction of my talk, you can always call the California Attorney General's office, and I'm sure that they will be happy to send 11 DOJ agents to come and carry me off the stage. In all seriousness, though, the raid that the Planned Parenthood-backed California Attorney General, Kamala Harris, who is currently running for Senate and seeking Planned Parenthood's endorsement and fundraising off of their petitions on her website. In all seriousness, all that raid really does at the end of the day is shows that this issue of Planned Parenthood selling baby body parts is not going away. Just when we might have thought that it was sinking into the back burner, it was slipping to the back page of the newspaper, and it wasn't really going to be in the headlines anymore, except for maybe the odd comment from at a presidential debate, it's back in the news again, and this issue is not going away. And it's not going away for two reasons. Number one, because it reveals to the public exactly the level of barbarity that our institution of legalized abortion brings us to in our country. And number two, it's an issue that Planned Parenthood is absolutely terrified of, and they cannot sleep easy and they will not rest easy until they're certain that every last document, every last second of video footage, every last piece of information and dirt that's out there about their criminal trafficking in baby body parts is finally swept under the rug and is back in their hands and nowhere else out in public. And that's what they're trying to do because they're terrified of this issue. It's not going away because already, I think it's now up to a total of a dozen different states have defunded Planned Parenthood as a result of the videos, and more are on the way. It's not going away because there are still multiple state and local investigations into Planned Parenthood's barbaric and criminal trafficking of aborted baby parts. And it's not going away because there is an excellent select committee to investigate the handling of baby body parts, the treatment of infant lives, and Planned Parenthood and the rest of the abortion industry that is doing excellent work in Congress right now and has full subpoena power over the entire country, even the states that are bought and paid for by Planned Parenthood, like California and Oregon and New York, and is doing very good work. And I expect to be laying out the criminal case against Planned Parenthood once and for all and readying that criminal case for a pro-life president in 2017 to pursue through their Justice Department. Back when CMP first started releasing our undercover videos in July of 2015, I was hoping for just one state investigation or local law enforcement investigation somewhere, and there ended up being about 30. I was hoping for just maybe one congressional hearing or congressional investigation, and there ended up being 5 that have now been condensed into this one really super select committee. And now we have a select committee to investigate Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, the same way that we have a select committee on Benghazi and Hillary Clinton's emails and the IRS scandal and all of that, which are in part one reason why she may not actually win the nomination or win the election this year. But a lot of people have not heard so much about the very good work that's being done by that committee, and so I want to highlight a little bit of it for you right now. The video that I'm about to show you, we just released on Tuesday morning of this past week, and literally just a few hours after we put this video up on YouTube was when 11 DOJ agents sent by Kamala Harris came to raid my apartment. So that might be an indication as to how damaging the information that comes out of this investigation will be for Planned Parenthood and how terrified they are of the reality that's going to be unveiled. If we could play that first video now.
Planned Parenthood has broken no laws.
Do you believe that anything on that form is creating an undue hardship or an intimidation or a misrepresentation to women who are being asked to consider whether or not they will donate this tissue?
That's an inappropriate statement and should not have been made on that form. I don't know who wrote it.
That's probably the biggest sticking point. Oh, one more thing my staff needs to talk about. They only have so many minutes to talk to the patients, so.
How long right now, average, are
I would say they probably have 10 minutes.
The Secretary of HHS issued the Belmont report, which says that consent is valid only if voluntarily given, and that, quote, inducements that would ordinarily be acceptable may become undue influences if the subject is especially vulnerable. If you could put up Exhibit A3, the consent form that is used in some of these clinics. Does this form violate our government's own guidance in its inducement to women considering abortion, especially with the promise and the statement in the very first opening of the consent form says research using the blood from pregnant women and tissue that has been aborted has been used to treat and find a cure for such diseases as diabetes, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer, and AIDS. I'll say I lost my mother last year with Alzheimer's. I am not aware that there is a cure out there. This was news to me.
I think the patients respond most to knowing the types of outcomes that it might contribute to. So, for example, they say Parkinson's research, Alzheimer's research, things like that.
Do you believe that anything on that form is creating an undue hardship or an intimidation or a misrepresentation to women who are being asked to consider whether or not they will donate this tissue?
If it's the form that says therapies for diseases such as Alzheimer's disease and all the rest have already been found, I agree. That's an inappropriate statement and should not have been made on that form. I don't know who wrote it. That would not have made it past my IRB either. That's an inappropriate statement and should not have been made on that form. I don't know who wrote it.
We have the highest standards.
That would not have made it past my IRB either.
Part of the legal process that's been set on a federal level for a pregnant woman, for an abortion patient to donate her fetal tissue, and I use that word donate loosely. The patient is told that she's donating, but the clinic is making money off of that donation. Part of the federal process that's been set for that, and that Planned Parenthood has asserted repeatedly that they follow and even go above and beyond, is that the patient is supposed to sign a consent form, a permission form, saying that she understands that she's donating her fetal tissue for research, and there's a couple different informed consent provisions of that. But no informed consent for any kind of medical procedure, any kind of process like that is valid if it's obtained through coercion or through undue influences or through promises or representations that are not true. And the doctor, the scientist, the witness in the congressional committee that you heard from in that video, Dr. Lawrence Goldstein, he is a research scientist at UC San Diego in California. He has been a longtime financial donor to Planned Parenthood in San Diego, which is one of the Planned Parenthoods that has been doing baby parts harvesting and trafficking for the longest time. He uses aborted fetal brain from his local Planned Parenthood that he gets, and he uses that as in his research at UC San Diego. And Dr. Goldstein admitted under oath in this congressional hearing, this donor, supporter, and customer of Planned Parenthood, that Planned Parenthood's own form that they have been using for the past 20 years that's authored on the national level at Planned Parenthood, provided to all of their local Planned Parenthood affiliates. He admitted under oath that that form is inappropriately worded and that it's unethical and would not pass the standard of review that's required from investigative review boards at major research universities like UC San Diego and others. This is a huge admission. This is an admission that's essentially an indictment of Planned Parenthood's entire baby parts program for the past 20 years, everywhere that they've done it, anywhere that they've done it, because the forms and the dialogue with their patients that this is built off of is completely illegitimate. And this is just the very beginning of the committee's hearings, and this is the very beginning of the information that's coming out of that investigation. The form that you saw in this video is specifically from Planned Parenthood Marmonti, which is one of the biggest Planned Parenthood affiliates in the country. Planned Parenthood is, on the national level, they're called Planned Parenthood Federation of America. They have a federated structure where their clinics all across the country are organized into different affiliates, which is basically a regional grouping of clinics. Many of you may have heard of Planned Parenthood Columbia-Willamette, which is the major affiliate, Planned Parenthood affiliate here in Oregon. Planned Parenthood Marmonti is the major affiliate in Northern California. Their name, Mar Monte, is Mar like the ocean and Monte like the mountains because they stretch from the coastal areas of Santa Cruz and San Jose through the Central Valley into Fresno and Sacramento, all the way up through Roseville, all the way up into Nevada, into Reno. So they go all the way from the coast to the Rocky Mountain, or to the Sierra Nevada mountains. And Planned Parenthood Marmonti is the biggest Planned Parenthood affiliate in the entire country. Their entire budget is about $100 million, which Planned Parenthood being a billion-dollar organization, they're basically 10% of the entire national organization. And Planned Parenthood Marmonti, as the biggest Planned Parenthood affiliate that pilots a lot of the new protocols for Planned Parenthood, that is sort of on the cutting edge of the Planned Parenthood world, of the new initiatives that they do, Planned Parenthood Marmonti has sort of led the charge and been the tip of the spear for baby parts harvesting and trafficking for the past several decades in the Planned Parenthood world. They started out working with an organization called Advanced Bioscience Resources, or ABR, which also harvests baby parts right here in Portland at Lovejoy Surgical Center, has been doing so for many years. And then around 2010, Planned Parenthood Marmonti switched to using a company called STEM Express because STEM Express was able to offer them a better deal for the baby parts in the contract that they set up with Planned Parenthood Marmonti. And middleman companies like ABR and STEM Express, they basically operate as a wholesaler of baby parts in between the supplier, which is the abortion clinic like Planned Parenthood or Lovejoy, and then the end user researchers, the customers like Dr. Goldstein in the video, or OHSU here in Portland, or other biotech companies or major pharmaceutical company R&D departments, groups like that. And so what the middleman procurement companies like STEM Express and ABR offer to the abortion clinics and offer to Planned Parenthood is essentially a turnkey solution where they provide all of the materials, they provide all of the packaging, they handle the shipping, they send in their own specially trained technicians who have on-the-job anatomy training about fetal anatomy to identify the body parts that are being requested by different researchers. They know how to look for the fetal heart or the brain of the baby or the lung of the baby or the liver. And so these middleman companies come into the abortion clinics every morning with a list that they've gotten from their research customers of how many eyeballs they're looking for, how many fetal livers they're looking for, what gestational age range they're looking for, if they need 5 paired sets, so 5 pairs from the same baby of liver and thymus together, or 5 brains of gestational age 18 to 22 weeks, and they go in with that list every morning that they're doing abortions at the clinic. They let the clinic management know what they're looking for. They have access to the patient records so they can identify which patients are going to be coming in, how gestated they are, how pregnant they are, if they'll fit in that window of the age of body parts they need to harvest. And in some cases, with, for example, the techs at STEM Express at Planned Parenthood Marmonti, they were actually the ones who were administering that consent form. And so when women would walk into the waiting room, the technicians would go up to them with their clipboards with the Planned Parenthood consent form, and they would say, "Hi, my name's David." And, well, they wouldn't say my name's David, but they would say, "Hi, I'm here with STEM Express. We work with this clinic, and if you sign this form, you can donate tissue from your abortion to save lives." And they make these promises that are completely unsubstantiated by the science that's actually out there. And the technicians from these middleman companies get paid a bonus per body part that they're able to harvest. And if you go to our website on cmp.org or centerformedicalprogress.org, you can go to our document vault and you can see some of these documents actually from STEM Express, where they list out the bonus schedule. They divide up the different baby body parts into different categories, category A, B, and C, based on their market value and how rare they are. And then depending on the volume of those body parts that the technician would be able to collect at the clinic that day, the technician would get paid a certain bonus by the company, by STEM Express. And then Planned Parenthood, of course, not to be left out. Planned Parenthood is not doing any work other than opening the door and letting the technicians in the morning. And yet Planned Parenthood is still getting paid a specimen fee per body part that's harvested from the aborted babies throughout the day. In the case of STEM Express, it was $55 per body part. In the case of Advanced Bioscience Resources, it was $60 per body part, which doesn't sound like a lot of money just on its own, but when you add up multiple body parts per baby, multiple aborted babies per day, multiple abortion days per week, over time, it adds up to a significant extra profit margin for the abortion clinic. So that's basically, there's two models that we identified during the 2.5 years that CMP did our investigative journalism study of Planned Parenthood and the baby parts trafficking phenomenon. That's the first model, according to which it happens, where you have basically a three-tiered setup with the abortion clinic supplier, the middleman wholesaler company, and then the end user at the end. And sometimes I refer to that as the California model because it was practiced sort of ubiquitously in California. Virtually all of the Planned Parenthood affiliates in California had a relationship with a middleman company like that came in, took care of all of the practical work of baby parts harvesting, and was still giving them a per specimen payment at the end of the day based on the volume of baby body parts that were harvested. The second model that we identified is sort of a direct supply model, which is what Planned Parenthood has been using here in Oregon, where the local Planned Parenthood has a relationship with the local research university, and they supply the body parts or the fetal tissue that they're looking for directly. And sometimes they might get a per specimen payment, as was done in Colorado and in Texas. Sometimes they might get a block grant, like appears to have been done here in Oregon. Basically a $5,000 block grant per study that they partner on. And the Oregon Right to Life has done some very good work, I think, in obtaining some of that information already about the relationship between Planned Parenthood and OHSU. I was looking up what the standard market rate is for renting medical research space or renting medical office space in Portland, which is what Planned Parenthood basically claims they were doing to OHSU in exchange for giving them aborted baby parts. And the going rate is about $25 per square foot. According to the amount of money that Planned Parenthood was getting for OHSU in exchange for that site rental, they were probably charging about $500 per square foot. So I think it's pretty clear that something more than just reimbursement is what was going on. And that's what Planned Parenthood is the most afraid of, is that once people start digging into the details, and especially once official investigators, government investigators, congressional committees, states attorneys general, once anybody starts looking beyond Planned Parenthood's assertions that they make very loudly and very insistently, as is their custom, but once people start looking beyond those into actually how the business operated and practically what was going on here, the payments and the amount of money that Planned Parenthood has been receiving for the body parts, however they label it, it becomes completely indefensible once you look at the dynamics of it. I'd like to play another video for you guys that illustrates some of the crafty ways that Planned Parenthood has tried to frame that second model that they use for the body parts harvesting, and what that looks like in reality. If we could play the second video.
What did that reimbursement go towards?
I mean, it's very clear what it is. It's getting samples.
Brain, kidney, thymus, liver, spleen, femur for specific specimens. The compensation would be higher.
Big money is being made from the sale of fetal body parts.
Even the most ardent pro-choice advocates, like Planned Parenthood President Gloria Feld, are disturbed by what we found.
it seems inappropriate, totally inappropriate. Where there is wrongdoing, it should be prosecuted and should be brought to justice.
My department contributes so much to the bottom line of our organization here.
I want to put these Planned Parenthood officials under oath and get them to swear about the practices that they were conducting in the state of Texas. Either their horrific practices will be revealed or they may be found in violation of law for perjury.
We get requests a lot for fetal tissue because we had 2 levels of invoicing for them. The way we had it worded is per consent, because the consent process was the administrative part that we had to do. And then we had an overall administrative fee for basically working it into the clinics themselves. And at the time, per consent was $25. Mm-hmm. And that also covered if a patient consented to be in the study and then for whatever reason we didn't get a sample or she changed her mind, because I see I didn't do that budget. It was existed when I got here. So there's probably some situations that somebody would consent and then just not.
Right.
We didn't get a sample, or she changed her mind, or something happened to the specimen. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah, because we technically can't. Ethically, I don't think they were. Based on what I'm reading here, I think it's paying for the specimen itself.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean,
language
on paper, it's got to be massaged a little.
Yes. So the consent process is what is unique to the visit. Mm-hmm. It's consenting the patient.
Right. So. Now, obviously, I mean, we don't want to end up paying for material that we can't use.
Obviously.
And now it might be so if there's a certain consent fee and then something else that represents the specimens.
I think definitely a la carte approach would be the best.
How we say that, how
we frame it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think is important too. That we're not altering anything, and it's clear that we're not altering anything. Mm-hmm. Even if the procedure itself, there's a modification in how they do it, it's still the same procedure, but we're doing it in a way that we preserve the integrity of the specimen. I think is something that we can definitely discuss that with trauma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like what will probably happen is we can kind of give you our our needs and sort of how in our according to our budgeting and our practical use, kind of what how we look at everything, and then if you guys can kind of translate that based on your experience, translate it into something that looks good on paper.
Yeah.
Right. I just don't want to turn into a situation that it's not financially beneficial for you.
Yeah, and I'll take you up on that. I'll take you up on that. We definitely want to do that because that's what staff and management need to see, that we're not underwriting any project. And I go to great efforts to demonstrate what the actual cost is for us, to whomever asks, and then this is what is budgeted. So they know, okay, yes, you're covering costs, there's margin that's covering overhead or whatever we need to make sure that everything is covered.
And so when we're coming in and making it beneficial to you financially, you can frame it so that that's...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
because that's how we're going to keep you happy, right?
Yes.
To make sure that financially you're growing your clinic, and however you need to say that, frame it on the other end.
Yes.
Okay.
If we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, then we can make it part of the budget that any dissections are this, and splitting the specimens into different shipments is this. I mean, it's all just a matter of line items. Everything. CNS, brain, kidney, thymus, liver, spleen, femur, bone marrow, hematopoietic stem cells from 14 to 22 weeks. Well, it would make me very happy for us to finish up what we need to do, and I can put you in contact with them. Oh, and I was wrong. They want 120.
120.
Uh-huh.
This is huge. This is the budget you said was in Salta, or no, they never got back to you about the...
They never got back to me. Budget was not... I mean, we never got to budget. I sent him a contract that had some budget numbers in it, and I said, this is from my previous project. This will be similar.
Do you have thoughts in terms of remuneration or compensation, what you guys typically do?
Missy
or they...
will.
Melissa Farrell. Yeah,
Farrell.
Missy is what she goes by.
Melissa Farrell
Okay.
will work on all of that
Excellent.
with you.
We've had it worded as per consent. Brain, kidney, thymus, liver, spleen, femur. It's all just a matter of line items.
That video, that undercover video, was taken at Planned Parenthood's mega clinic in Houston, Texas, exactly 1 year ago today. That was on April 9th, 2015. That's at the Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast affiliate is one of the biggest, wealthiest Planned Parenthood affiliates in the entire country. They're based out of the Gulf Coast, Houston region. They bought an old bank back in 2008 or 2009, I think. It was 7 stories tall. They converted it into an abortion clinic. It's shaped like a giant cash register, which is rather appropriate. Or some of you may have seen the meme that's gone around on Facebook where it has a split screen, and on one side it shows the step pyramid from the Aztec human sacrifice, on the other side it shows the step pyramid of the Planned Parenthood mega clinic. And it shows you human sacrifice in 1515 and 2015 as just 2 sides of the same coin. But so that undercover site visit was done at the Planned Parenthood Houston Gulf Coast Mega Clinic exactly a year ago to the day. And at the end of all of our probably, I think, 4 or 5 hour long business discussion, negotiation meeting with Melissa Farrell, who's the director of research at Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast and who has managed their entire baby parts program for the past about 10 years that she's been working there. At the end of that visit, we then were allowed to go up onto the actual surgical floor of the clinic and go to the back path lab to examine the specimens, examine the quality of the specimens, meaning to check out whether or not the baby body parts were going to be good enough and intact enough for us to harvest and use. And so that baby at the end, that's a second trimester baby that was aborted that day. From a girl who was 15 or 16 years old. Her mother brought her to the clinic because she was pregnant. She was 18 or 19 weeks pregnant. It was an 18 to 20 week baby was what we were told. I still remember the smell. I remember the aura in the back path lab, which is the room where they deal with the body parts of the babies after they've done the abortions. And it was like a little slice of hell, seeing the little ribs of the baby sticking up with the hands and arms ripped off, pieces, almost like pieces of meat just lying in the dish. The eyeballs were there, the heart was there and separate, and you could see the little fingernails on the hands. So that was exactly 1 year ago to the day. And so if that baby hadn't been killed that day, that baby would be a little 10-month-old or 9-month-old would be an infant today. And so I just think I wasn't planning on talking about that when I came here, but it just occurred to me now, and so I think it's important to honor that. And that was one of our intentions when we knew that we were actually going to go into the clinics, when we would be there while abortions were going on and we would see the dead babies afterwards. I said to my investigative partner, Sandra Merritt, who's been very brave as well, that if nothing else, we would be a presence in that clinic, and we would bring a presence into it that if no one else was in that clinic, we would at least be there to welcome their little lives and welcome their presence for the short time that they would be there until they would pass on to the other side. But what this video illustrates in particular is the way that Planned Parenthood masks their fees and masks the baby part payments when they have a direct relationship with in a sort of a direct supply relationship, like they've done for the most part in Texas. And so you'll see that Melissa Farrell says that they worded the per specimen payments for the baby parts as per patient consent. And what she describes is a two-layered system where they would charge a consent fee of $25 per patient that they got to sign the form. And you'd say, okay, it probably doesn't take you a whole hour. $25 an hour is, first of all, a pretty good price, but second of all, probably doesn't take you a full hour per patient to do that. But let's say maybe that's, a little reasonable. But then they would charge a second layer. They got 30 patient consents signed. So that was, 30 times $25 a consent form. Then they would charge another layer on top of that for the patients that actually produced usable, saleable tissue, fetal tissue. They would charge a second consent payment of $150. And there was only 26 of those out of that same set. So you can see that they're using these multiple layers with just slightly different wording to try and mask what's really going on, which is the buying and selling of body parts based on their market value and based on whether or not they're usable for the buyer. For some reason, that wasn't enough for the district attorney of Harris County in Houston, where one of their assistant district attorneys is actually on the board of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, of that same abortion clinic. And so instead they indicted myself and Sandra and refused to even examine the charges against Planned Parenthood, refused to even vote on them. But the state of Texas has an ongoing investigation, and their investigation continues. And so I have hope that this evidence is not going to be in vain, and that baby's death is not going to be in vain, and that justice will win out, and good evidence and good information will win out at the end of the day. So what I would like to do is open it up to questions in just a little bit. I don't have a lot of time left, but I'd like to close with just reminding you that this issue is not going away, and we can't let this issue go away. Because the way that Planned Parenthood has been engaged in harvesting and trafficking baby parts is completely indefensible according to the law, and they ought to be held accountable for it. The reason ultimately that we can't let it go away, and the reason that I decided to do this project overall, is because I think that there's something particularly poignant and powerful and disturbing about the practice of harvesting and selling the body parts of the children killed through abortion. Because what it is an objectification beyond the initial objectification that says that the baby can be killed. It's an exploitation beyond the initial exploitation of making money off of someone's pain and someone's scary situation. It's a dehumanization of the unborn child beyond the initial dehumanization that says that the unborn baby is something that's unimportant that can be killed. And it's a contradiction because on the one hand, the unborn child is not considered to be fully human enough to be protected by our laws, and at the same time, it's precisely because of their equal and identical humanity to our own that they are so valuable for medical experimentation, and that Planned Parenthood and companies like ABR and STEM Express and their customers will hunt after those body parts like buried treasure. On the one hand, they're considered garbage enough to be thrown away, and on the other hand, their parts are considered valuable enough to sell. And they will, even in the process of destroying, they'll preserve the part. They'll try so hard to protect the brain or the kidney or the lung, whatever body part they're going to use during the abortion, while at the same time destroying the whole. And I think that that's why Planned Parenthood is so terrified of this subject and so terrified of this issue, because it cuts to the core of what they do. And it becomes undeniable when you look at it in this light. The reality of what's going on becomes undeniable, and so that's why this issue isn't going away. That's why we can't let it go away. And I would encourage all of you to work very hard here in Oregon, where OHSU is still partnered with Planned Parenthood to harvest baby parts, not to let this issue go away, because this is a winning issue. So thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you for your very warm welcome, and I'm open to questions now. So the question was when Kamala Harris's Department of Justice agents invaded my home and took all of my electronic stuff and all of the video footage and all of my laptops and everything, do I have copies? You will find out very soon if I have copies. Although. But in all sobriety, we are still assessing the full extent of what was taken and what options in terms of backups and what avenues of backups we do have available. So that's my answer for now. Yeah. So the question is about the videos with my friend Holly O'Donnell. Holly used to be one of the procurement technicians, one of the harvesting specialists for the company STEM Express in Northern California. Holly is the real deal, and she's a hero because she just wanted to get into the medical field to help people. She was a licensed phlebotomist, just someone who draws blood. She thought she was getting a job just working for like a Quest Diagnostics or a company that contracts with medical offices to do the blood draws. She shows up on her first day of work. They tell her to go to a Planned Parenthood clinic in Concord, California. She walks in for her on-the-job training. She thinks, okay, I guess we're drawing blood from pregnant women, nothing surprising. They march her into the back room of the clinic, sit her down at the counter. Right in front of her is an aborted 8-week-old baby, and her supervisor says, all right, here's your on-the-job training. Here's some tweezers. Can you show me where the leg is? Show me where the arm is? Show me where the liver is? Show me where the lung is? And Holly fainted. And she woke up in the recovery room a few hours later, and one of the Planned Parenthood nurses said to her, "Oh, don't worry, that happens to everybody. You'll get over it after a little while." Although some of them never get over it. And Holly was, she was just she still is just an average, normal millennial girl. She's 25 years old now. And she desperately needed a job, and she thought, well, they say it's for helping people, they say it's for cures, so I guess it's the right thing to do. She tried to stick it out for 6 months, could not handle it. At the end of 6 months, she said, this is blood money, and I can't do this anymore. And Holly is one of those rare people who can sit in such a dark place and in such a terrible place for that amount of time and still not be affected by it and still see it for what it is and walk right out of there and then tell the whole world about it. And that's why Holly O'Donnell is one of my heroes. So one of Holly's most vivid memories and one of the most harrowing things that happened to her while she was working inside the Planned Parenthood clinics for STEM Express was that one day the doctor aborted a very, very late term. The Planned Parenthoods in California go up to 20 to 24 weeks, so it was one of those in that last segment of their gestational age, 5 or 6 month old baby. He was a little boy. Holly says he came out almost completely intact. She remembers his little face and everything, and she said that her supervisor called her into the back room and said, "Hey, come here, Holly, I want to show you something interesting." And she said that when she walked in, the baby's chest was open, and her supervisor, Jessica, had tapped on the heart, and it was beating again. And that's not the first time that people who worked in clinics or worked as harvesting technicians have relayed that sometimes they would cut the chest open and they would observe that the heart of the baby was actually still beating. And so that's an indication that that was actually a born alive infant, that was not just a regular abortion. And one thing that I learned, undercover and having a lot of quality time with abortion doctors for 2.5 years is that when you're when you're doing the practice of second trimester abortions, it's not unheard of that you'll have completely intact babies come out, and it's not unheard of that you'll have born alive infants. It's something that you could expect, maybe 1 in every 30 or 1 in every 60 cases would come out that way. So yes, there's definitely, that's why the Select Investigative Panel is called the Select Investigative Panel on Infant Lives, because ultimately where all of this leads is that abortion may not just doesn't just operate as womb emptying, it often operates as feticide or as infanticide, especially in the upper gestations. So, yeah. Definitely. So, so the state of Texas passed a very good and very reasonable law back in 2013, I think it was. It's called HB2. It's basically an omnibus clinic regulations bill where it requires that abortion doctors need to have admitting privileges at a local hospital within 30 miles radius of where they're doing the abortion, so there's continuity of care if the patient has a complication, which happens frequently. And then it also requires that that the abortion clinics have to be built and licensed as ambulatory surgical centers, which is basically a kind of like gold standard surgical center level of regulation. The independent abortion clinics in Texas are not happy about that, and so they've been suing about it for the past couple of years here. Planned Parenthood, interestingly, did not join that lawsuit before the Supreme Court. Planned Parenthood has chosen to comply with the law because they realize that it's actually going to get them more business, because as the independent providers don't want to spend the money to raise up their standards, and so they close down. Planned Parenthood has the know-how and has the manpower to build these huge mega clinics, which they end up licensing as ASCs anyway. And so Planned Parenthood actually is positioning themselves to get basically a monopoly of the abortion market in Texas via the implementation of that law. I attended the oral argument at the Supreme Court for that law back at the beginning of March, and I was sitting just 2 rows right behind Cecile Richards, the president of Planned Parenthood. She was sitting right next to Vicky Saporta, who's the CEO of the National Abortion Federation, and they were, in the past, Planned Parenthood and NAF have had sort of a rocky relationship, but they seem to have been brought together by something, and they were sort of chatting about something the whole time. They did see me. I smiled and waved afterwards as we were walking out, and we passed each other. Cecile and I passed each other in the coat room. We were probably just about 3 feet apart, and we were both pretending not to see each other. I was talking to my lawyer, who was right in front of me, and then she ended up abandoning the search for her coat and just kind of turned and ran the other way. But then she turned back and looked at me about 30 feet away. She turned back and just stared at me like. It was almost like a deer in the headlights kind of look. I don't know what's going on. So they're spooked by something. I mean, I think I was pretty friendly with them in all the interactions that we had. But anyway, but Cecile was never my favorite anyway. Deb Nucatola was always my favorite. So in the pink in the back. Definitely. So the question is, how did I first get information about baby parts selling in the first place? The whole issue kind of came across my radar back in 2010. I had a conversation with Mark Crutcher from Life Dynamics out in Texas, who is responsible for the first really big seminal expose on baby body parts trafficking. He had a mole in a clinic who was basically a whistleblower and got a lot of documentation, a lot of information back in 1999, 2000. And unfortunately, that was pre-YouTube, pre-internet, before Facebook and social media. And so the mainstream media was ultimately able to bury the story, and Planned Parenthood was kind of able to wriggle away without anybody even knowing that it was going on there. And I remember having a 3-hour-long conversation with Mark Crutcher about it back in the summer of 2010, when he was just telling me all sort of the ins and outs of it and a lot of the behind-the-scenes drama and happenings. And I remember being just shocked and horrified and really upset about it. I was crying after I got off the phone. I had nightmares about it for the next week. Because what really gripped me about it, and what I still can't get over to this day, is that paradox that's at the heart of it. That on the one hand, the big lie about abortion is that there's nothing valuable about the unborn baby. There's nothing human enough or special enough about the baby fetus. But at the same time, they're special enough, valuable enough, and human enough to sell their body parts for medical experimentation. And that really bothered me. And I also felt like it was something that makes the entire abortion debate so much clearer. And for that reason, it deserved to be on the tip of everybody's tongue. If we were going to talk about abortion, if we were going to have a debate in the 2016 presidential election about it, it's something that deserved to be front page headline news and deserved to have a very in-depth, long-term investigative journalism expose done on it. So I wanted to do this for a very long time and was finally able to do that in 2013. So that's the short genesis of it. Yeah, the question is how were we able to keep it together going undercover into abortion clinics and meetings with late-term abortion doctors and abortion conferences. And there's certainly a lot of dissociation that you have to be able to do, and you have to really believe in your mission, and you have to have sort of you have to be, kind of keep your eye on the prize, but also you have to find something about the individuals that you're dealing with, even though they're doing things that are absolutely monstrous. You have to still find what's human about them and find something that you can still relate to or still connect to. One of my priests made one of the best pieces of advice I ever got very early on in the project is he gave us a prayer to pray. He said that we should, number one, pray for forgiveness for the enemy. Number two, pray that all curses would be turned into blessings. And number three, that those would return upon the sender 3 times. And that was the attitude that we tried to carry with us throughout the entire project, and in all of these, even going into some of the darkest spaces. And it's the Easter season now. Christ is risen. If anyone knows, in the Orthodox Church, there's a very beautiful ancient hymn that says, "Christ is risen from the dead, and by his death he has trampled upon death, and upon those in the tombs bestowing life." A very old idea that the light of the world and that the source of everything that's good can penetrate into even the darkest places, and bring something redeeming and transform those and make it better. And so we couldn't have done this without that spiritual element, I think, without knowing that there's something almost evangelical about bringing the gospel even to the existential margins of reality, which is what Pope Francis talks about, to bring the presence of God and to bring the presence of our Lord Jesus even into the darkest places, and even to the existential margins of our existence, which I don't think that any place is more of a margin than the front door or the back laboratory of an abortion clinic. So that's how we did it. The question is, are abortions ever done in normal hospitals, and is there any evidence that they are selling body parts? And the answer is basically yes to both of those, with some qualifiers. The first is that 90 to 95, it might even be 99%, the vast majority of abortions in our country are done in outpatient clinics, in the proverbial abortion clinic. Very, very relatively few abortions are done in hospitals, precisely because the practice of abortion brings so many problems with it that normal hospitals and normal medical people just don't want to deal with. You've got angry boyfriends storming in and out, you've got people smoking, you've got the stress on the nurses and everything. So it's not something that a normal hospital wants to deal with. Even in Northern California, and you guys have Kaiser as well in Oregon. The Kaiser hospitals in Northern California, for a while, they're very, very pro-abortion. They wanted to get into the abortion business, so they tried to start doing in-house abortions in the Kaiser hospitals. And they had to stop it and start contracting it out again to one of the local outpatient clinics, because the nurses and the hospital staff and just their infrastructure, they were not set up to deal with all of the drama and all of the pain and all of the darkness that operating an abortion business brings with it. So yes, hospitals do abortions. It's pretty rare. You'll probably find it more often in very big liberal university hospitals, and that's where they'll have some of the specialists, even sometimes Planned Parenthood specialists who are on staff at the university. Maybe they teach in the OBGYN department, and they'll handle a lot of the later cases and more complicated later cases, 24, 26, 28 weeks. There are some major research university hospitals, like, for example, the the University of Pittsburgh, I think it is, or Brigham and Women's, and some others on the East Coast who sort of pioneered a lot of the baby parts trafficking and harvesting and stuff like that back in the 1960s and 1970s. I don't know so much about it today, but there is a lot of archival information out there about that. Definitely. So the question is there was an interview where Cecile Richards was saying that the undercover videos were highly edited and highly spliced, and how do we address that? And we address that in a couple of ways. So this has been a very popular talking point for Planned Parenthood and for their supporters, that the videos are highly edited, and they say that on news broadcasts that are themselves highly edited. And it's really, I mean, it's kind of a master stroke of messaging, because they say highly edited, which is a very actually vague term, by which they mean to insinuate that they're doctored, or that there's something artificial about it. That, you know, it was all CGI when we had their senior director of medical services with the wine and the salad drinking and eating and talking about crushing below and crushing above in order to get more intact body parts. And so I think the best response is really that the camera doesn't lie. And at the end of the day, Cecile Richards can say whatever she wants about whether she thinks what sort of context, you know, she thinks it's appropriate in which to drink wine and talk about crushing below and crushing above in order to get body parts. You know, if they think that there is a context in which the things that these doctors have said is appropriate, then let them explain the context. But they can't do that. All they can do is make insinuations about the editing, by which they mean doctoring, and sometimes they even say doctoring. But CMP has been far more transparent than any major news organization, CNN, ABC, CBS, you name it, in that we provide the full footage of those conversations with the doctors on YouTube for everyone to see, so you can see it in context yourself, and you'll notice that the most damning lines, the most horrible admissions that they make, those don't change between the full version and the 30-second version that just isolates it. It's the same doctor saying the same words, and there's no context in which these things are appropriate. So I would just say that at the end of the day, the videotape doesn't lie. And Planned Parenthood can't deny that this is their own senior level leadership making these statements on tape, and there's nothing defensible about those statements. And really, at the end of the day, for Cecile Richards or anyone to try and resort to the accusation that they're edited or something like that, at the end of the day, all they're doing is defending exactly what those doctors are saying on tape. And I think that's where they need to be challenged, is that number one, the videotape doesn't lie, the camera doesn't lie, and number two, are you defending what your senior level leadership is saying on those tapes then? So three questions. The first one is how can we hold publicly funded, or how can we hold the buyer side, the universities and others, accountable for buying baby body parts? Number two, do I have any further plans for exposing that side of it? And number three, how can you support the legal defense of everything? To answer number one, I think one of the best things that you can do is get familiar with the Freedom of Information Act process, or with your state open records process, and use that early and often. We should probably all be sending out a FOIA request a day to our local university research laboratories and any that are publicly funded that would be subject to FOIA, in order to get all of the information. I mean, they will have this all in their university purchasing departments. They'll have the records of if they've purchased baby body parts from Advanced Bioscience Resources, or from STEM Express, or from Da Vinci Biologics, or any of the numerous companies out there. They'll also have the records if they've had a contract with a local Planned Parenthood. So Oregon Right to Life has already done some very good work on the OHSU situation, and there's probably more that can be done. So I'd encourage you guys to work with your local pro-life groups and people who've already started to sketch out the path in terms of how to turn that into an even more robust kind of catch-all operation. In terms of what CMP is doing, we're still very focused on the supply side, because at the end of the day, it's on the supply side that they're actually killing the babies. And I personally, I see the greatest culpability and responsibility there. It's an interesting thing it's an interesting detail that many of the middleman wholesalers actually represent to their customers and represent to the universities that everything the middleman and the supply source is doing is fully according to the law and fully adhering to all of the applicable standards. And in reality, that's fraud, because we know that the financial relationships between those companies and Planned Parenthood, the alteration of the abortion procedures, the kind of consent forms that they're using, or sometimes not even getting consent according to whistleblowers, all of that is against the law, against the ethics, and against what the university wants to be involved in, or even what their own institutional review boards would recommend. And these companies are representing to them as paying customers that everything is fine, don't worry about it. So I place a lot more responsibility on the suppliers and on the middleman than I do on the end users. And we could talk about that more, but that is the kind of the reality as I see it. And then for the third question, how can you support the legal defense? CMP does have a legal defense fund. If you go to cmp.org/donate or centerformedicalprogress.org/donate, you can contribute directly to the CMP Legal Defense Fund. There's three very, very good public interest law firms who are defending us as well. Those are the Thomas More Society, Life Legal Defense Foundation, and the Freedom of Conscience Defense Fund. So all of them are very good and worthy of your support. Indeed. So the question is, how am I doing personally with all of this? Have I have death threats? Do I have a bodyguard? Personally, I think I'm doing pretty well. I'm a normal 27-year-old. Is that the understatement of the evening? I have had death threats. I don't take them terribly seriously, but I have had death threats. I think that my philosophy has always been that we can't live in fear. I don't believe in living in fear, and so you always want to be smart. You use your head, you trust your gut, you watch your back, but we also don't live in fear. It's true. Like, yes, we are dealing with people who are killers, but at the same time, they're the consummate bullies too, because the people that abortion doctors kill are the tiniest and the most defenseless and the ones who can't fight back at all. And so, as twisted as they are and what they believe in, the things that they do, most of them, the vast majority of them, I don't think would kill anyone except for a little defenseless person, because they are the consummate bullies. So, thank you. So the question was, what's the quickest way to prove that Planned Parenthood actually is selling baby parts? And number two, how can you pray for me? To answer the first question, one of the most significant and overlooked facts in the debate so far, or more sort of developments, is that right from the very beginning, Planned Parenthood agreed with the same bright line that we put down, which is that if you profit from baby body parts, that is illegal. And what the law prohibits is profiting from fetal tissue. And so that's very important, because Planned Parenthood has agreed with the same with that bright line. So then that's Planned Parenthood's own admission. So if you can prove that they took in more than they spent on making that fetal tissue donation happen, then by Planned Parenthood's own admission, you've proved that they violated the law. And it's very, very easy to show that they're profiting from the baby parts in a couple different ways. Number one, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, right? Like the advertisements from STEM Express that advertise to the clinics that it's going to be a financial benefit to the clinic if you partner with them. But the biggest thing is that the fact is, at the end of the day, Planned Parenthood doesn't actually do any work and doesn't have any costs when they're supplying the body parts. When they're partnered with a middleman company like STEM Express or like ABR or like Novogenics or like Da Vinci Biologics, those middleman wholesaler companies take on all of the actual work of harvesting fetal tissue or harvesting baby parts. So they do everything. They do the shipping and handling and packaging and consenting and all of that. And at the same time, they then turn around and pay Planned Parenthood a fee per body part that they harvested. And so all of that is straight up profit. It's a turnkey solution that provides just straight up extra profit margin to the clinic. And according to Planned Parenthood's own admission that profiting from fetal tissue would be illegal, that is exactly how that business model is operating. There's no cost whatsoever to Planned Parenthood. Oh, and how to pray for me? Please pray for courage, for wisdom, and for clarity. Definitely. Yeah. So the question is, the question is basically, it looks like our civilization is falling apart around us, right? And it's like one more thing after another, and now we know that they're selling baby body parts. So how do we deal with that? What do we do? And I don't have all the answers, but what I do believe very, very strongly is that it starts with abortion. It starts with the fact that we have now lived in a civilization for close to 44 years, is it now, where we kill our children. And what else, I mean, like, what else is left of any kind of human community, any kind of society, any kind of, just being compassionate and treating each other with respect? How could you, what else is left when you kill your children? There's nothing left. There's really nothing left. And so, of course, it's all going to come crashing down around you. But I believe very, very strongly, just as a, as I guess as a humanist, but also as a Christian, that that the graces that will pour out on our civilization and on our people, if we just do the right thing and stop killing our children, I think everything else will follow after that. So I really think that it all starts with, people said back in, was it 2009 when Obamacare was passed, people said, oh, this is the end of America. America ended in 1973 when Roe versus Wade was passed. But after, again, after the passion and the crucifixion always comes the resurrection. And so I don't think, the culture of death cannot survive on its own. I have spent too much quality time with too many abortion doctors, listening to their voices crack and get hoarse, talking about the baby parts and how difficult it is to kill children every day, to believe that their way of life or that their belief system is sustainable. Ultimately, it's not. They are eating themselves. And that's because when you're cut off from the source and when you don't believe there's anything good about human life, how could you, there's no, they are unsustainable. And so that should give us all a lot of hope, I think. That I think it starts by, for everyone it's going to be a little bit different, right? Not all of us are called to do investigative journalism work. Not all of us are called to do lobbying. Not all of us are called to do sidewalk counseling or run a pregnancy resource center. But there's something, the vineyard is so vast. There's a place for every worker. So we all have a little niche where we can acknowledge God, take the next right step, and be a sign of hope to those around us. And so that's where I would encourage everybody to start. So, sorry, the question is, some question the morality or the ethics of undercover work, and what is my response? So I think that most people realize that just in general in our society that undercover work is a very important part of both journalism and law enforcement. Some people typically from a certain kind of Christian perspective have some difficulty with it. Well, aren't you lying? Like, isn't it the ends justify the means or something? To me, undercover work is actually not lying. It's a special type of communication that is ultimately meant to serve the truth and to communicate the truth even more clearly. The same way that many of the ways that we speak and many of the ways that we communicate, whether it's metaphor, figurative language, poetry, acting, even lots of stuff like that, it's not a literal 1=1 communication of truth. But it's precisely because it's non-literal that it sometimes becomes an even more powerful way of exposing the truth and making it known and promoting it. And so I see undercover work as basically a special type of communication that is at the service of the truth. And that's ultimately the criterion for I guess ethical language or ethical assertions, is when it's in the service of the truth like that. So that's my response.